Most entrepreneurs think that they have a revenue problem. But what if the real issue isn't a revenue problem, but it's how you manage the money that you already have? So if cash flow has ever felt confusing, stressful, overwhelming, or out of control, this episode with my dear brother will help change the way that you see it. And if this is your first time on the podcast, welcome to the Mind of George Show. It's the show for you as an entrepreneur who knows that scaling your business isn't just about strategies and tactics. It's about breaking free from the outdated business models, the crappy marketing tactics, and the mindset limitations that are almost baked into our industry. And it's so that you can grow and scale with ease and impact by mastering that mindset, which it is an internal game, refining your customer journey, and creating marketing that truly connects with who you are and your audience. And today I have my cash flow king on the podcast. He's a dear friend named Phil McGilvray. He's a former financial advisor, stockbroker, and he's a leading expert when it comes to cash flow and financial management for all levels of entrepreneurs. And he walked away from one of Australia's top financial firms, $1 million a year salary, and made it his mission to simplify money and empower business owners to thrive, just like his grandma taught him to do with money. It's an absolute beautiful story. And his approach, what I love, is not about spreadsheets and complicated finance jargon. It's about making your money in your business and in your life work for you so that you can have true financial freedom. And so we dive into a lot of topics, and it was an incredible conversation. We cover the biggest myths about money that keep entrepreneurs stuck in survival mode, why most people fail in business, and it's not because of revenue, it's actually because of cash flow, the dangerous trap of business creep and how it kills your profits, how to build financial systems that give you freedom and not stress, and the power of grandma's jars, which is the name of his company, and how a simple method can transform the way that you manage money. And so I would consider this like almost a required listen for every entrepreneur at every level. And so if you've ever felt like your business controls you instead of the other way around, this episode will give you the clarity and confidence to take back control of your finances, your cash flow, and your future. So let's dive in. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show. And before I even get into today's guest, I have to hit this important stat. Did you know that 8 out of 10 entrepreneurs fail within 10 years and that 2 out of 10 survive less than 2%? They ever thrive in their business. And there's this commonality that comes in all of it, which is cash flow. It's unhealthy relationships with money. It's not understanding the tool and how to use it. And today's guest is a brother of mine from about as far away over the pond as we can be, who just thrives in helping making cash simple and also filling up grandma's jar, which I'm sure we're going to get into today. But he believes, and I know this to be true because I work with this man, my clients work with this man, that the failure rate could be halved from failure into thriving by focusing on the right things and understanding how to use the tools in front of us. And this man, he's incredible, and he has a mission on his heart from God to be able to make money simple for people. He's an incredible husband. He's an incredible father. He's an incredible entrepreneur. And deeper than that, he's an incredible man with a deep passion. And I mean deep passion of experience when it comes to money. Like walking away as one of Australia's leading stockbroker and financial planning firms, 20 years as a financial advisor, and then completely stepped away with a heart of service to help entrepreneurs, because I think, and I can speak for him, that he understands that entrepreneurs change the world, and we're not out here to make more greedy people wealthy. We're here to empower people to make a difference. And so he teaches people the basics of financial management all the way up to thriving and scaling at every level of business. And I'm excited and honored to have him. He's a dear friend, and he also has a brand new book out to be able to put the power into people's hands to make that cash flow work for them and that profit work for them and to be able to navigate all this. So I'd love to welcome my dear friend Phil to the show. So Phil, welcome to the show.
Wow, thank you, George. That's a bit humbling to sort of have you start with that, but thank you, mate. It's an absolute privilege to be here and to share with your people.
Yeah, and truthfully, with everybody listening, and I'm so self-aware of all the words that I overuse right now. Truthfully, I'm just gonna work on canceling these out of my vocabulary. In my own personal experience, you have been a lifesaver, and at the deepest level, not only in strategies and tactics, but also in philosophy and shifting beliefs and shifting awarenesses and understanding how to have a healthy relationship with cash flow. And you've helped me personally navigate some of the most trying, tumultuous times in business and personal life because of changes, but also have brought this deep level of peace to me, to where money went from this icky thing of oh, I have to make it or I have to use it this way, to this tool
Yeah.
that I get to use and experience. And so I feel like my intro isn't even close to doing justice to the
Uh-huh.
relief that you say about me. And just to make you a little bit more uncomfortable too, not to mention our mutual friends, but all
Yeah.
the people that I've ever recommended you to, made referrals to, or has ever mentioned you, has nothing to say, but you are an absolute sage when it comes to humanity, love, finances, money, and who you are as a human. And so I'm going to spend the first couple minutes of this, like now that we're 3 minutes in, like just giving you kudos and letting you accept all of that. Because for everybody listening, it feels like I have like my best friend, my father, my grandfather, this sage wisdom and advice who also knows the things that I don't know that helps me with all of this. And so it truly is a pleasure, my friend.
Oh, thank you, mate. Thank you. Uh, and I get it. Yeah, you know, we've spoken about this before, but money is so central to everything that we do in life. And this is why I have so much joy with what I do is that I know that when I help someone with their finances, it's not just about the money. It's, when their finances are better, their relationships are better, their mental health is better, their physical health is better, their productivity is so much better. And their joy and belief in themselves is so much greater when we've got this thing nailed down. And we avoid it because we think it's hard. And the reality is, if you could just get the basics in place, it is not at all hard. And I truly believe that the financial, I don't know, you look at the lawyers and the financiers and those are things actually overcomplicate money just to sort of keep us in our place. And I'm not a conspiracy theory kind of guy, but I do think that we've been sold a lie about how hard it is actually to manage money.
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I think that that's a good place to kind of position the first question I have, because I know personally, I had my own view. I had my own beliefs from my paradigm from growing up basically in poverty and like homelessness and survival. Also, the view that the world imprinted on me and entrepreneurship and what it looks like and how you do this. And I would love for you to like kind of unpack like what are the common myths or mistakes that you see people making when it comes to money, managing their money, their relationship with it as a tool. Like you've navigated this and helped so many entrepreneurs with it, but I feel like it's so common and there's almost shame in talking about it, right? Like it's like the
Yeah.
behind the door conversation, or I
Yeah.
can only talk about it when something gets bad. But I
Yeah.
think for everybody listening, it's such a common thing and it's not educated on and it's not celebrated. So I'd love to hear from you. Like, what are some of those mistakes or myths that you see perpetuating kind of the whole ecosystem?
Oh, look, I mean, I think a big one is an assumption that everyone makes that everyone else knows how to manage money but them. And so they
Mm,
go through life assuming that everyone's got it all together financially, and therefore they can't talk about it because if they do, they're going to be that sole person that just hasn't got it sorted. And in fact, the reality is quite the opposite. It's probably, 90% of people don't have this sorted out and 10% do. And so it's just ridiculous that we're afraid to talk about it on the assumption that we're the only one that has these problems with money or doesn't understand it or hasn't got it all sorted. It's the complete opposite of that. And so, I mean, I think that's a big problem. And because of that, we carry a lot of shame, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of fear around money. And then it becomes a perpetuating sort of cycle because then we believe that we're just not good with it and we don't want to touch it. That's probably the biggest thing. And also, I see a lot of entrepreneurs that will say to me, "Well, Phil, I'm a visionary entrepreneur. I'm a big picture thinker. I do not want to get sort of bogged down in the detail. I don't want that negative energy in my life or what have you, And I see this all the time. And yet these are people that have incredible gifts, incredible um, skills that they're changing the world with. But unless they get the financial side of things sorted, unless they give that the time it needs, they're forever going to be chasing more revenue, more sales, more because they haven't got everything sorted. And it becomes exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And then they start to resent the gift that they've got because they never feel free. Those goals, those gifts that they've got have never seemed further away. And it doesn't matter how much money you make. Whereas as soon as you can dial that in, it actually frees you up to go, I'm okay. I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. I've got reserves in the bank. I can see that even if I didn't bring in any new clients for the next 6 months, I'm okay. And that gives them a space then to really thrive.
I think you nailed the corner. I feel very called out right now, by the way, on the visionary conversation. Okay. So like little like straight to the knees for everybody listening. I feel like verbatim, that is what I said to Phil in a Voxer message, like verbatim. And I was like, no. My team's going to handle it. They'll go look. They'll go do it.
And that was my intention, mate. It is just that it is the thing that I see so often. And literally, I had a really good conversation with a mutual friend of ours not so long ago, and that was exactly her. And she's actually come to the place too where it's okay. I've been putting off, and telling, getting my business partners or someone else to do this for me. She says, but I realize it's not working. It's working, but I need to own it. And I think the moment you decide you're going to own it, the reality is it is so. And one of the big mistakes that people make too is they assume that it's hard. And nothing that I teach is the maths behind it is no harder than grade 5 maths. You can be an 8-year-old and do this. Putting these numbers together, you don't need an accounting degree. In fact, I don't come from an accounting background. I come from a financial advice background, and I was as you said before, I was a partner in a stockbroker financial advising firm. But I just did cash flow, and I basically just teach a sort of an advanced version of what my grandma taught me with her glass jars. It's really no more complicated. But we assume it's going to be hard, and it isn't. So yeah.
I wanna get into the glass jars in a minute, but we're gonna open that loop for everybody because they're so good, and we'll go there in a minute. I also think one of the ones that I see personally, and I would love your thoughts on this, and I see this with clients, I see this with people I'm coaching and consulting, is that my business account is my personal bank account.
Yes.
Right. And the best way I ever heard a client put this, who has a very good system and management in, the way that she described this is my business is a baby that has its own needs.
Yeah.
And it needs to be fed, and it needs to have water, and it needs to do it, but it also has to be done in collaboration or in congruence with what it can be fed, right? Like if it can't be fed organic, grass-fed, farm to table every day, like you might have to hit some ramen for a little while, but it has its own needs. And so I'd kind of love your thoughts on that one, because I see that one a lot.
Oh yeah. And here's the thing. It is impossible for you to get real clarity on how is my business performing if you've got your business and your personal mixed up. And this is one of the hardest things when we sit down with a business and we look at, is this business even profitable? Like, for instance, one of the biggest mistakes I see entrepreneurs making is they're not charging enough. I actually, I used to have coaches that would say to me, Phil, you need to charge more. And it always bothered me, because that just seemed to be the solution to, just charge more. And they weren't coming from and I think sometimes they were just trying to pump people up. But I also think there is a fundamental reality that when I look at, here's the salary I need to be paying myself, so that I can, support my family and do everything. Here's what my cost of goods sold are. Here's what my overheads are. Here's what I need to be putting aside for tax. And here's the profit margin I'd like to build into my business, because I'm not a charity, I'm a business. What do I need to charge to make that a reality? Often people just aren't charging enough. And the thing is, they're out there thinking that if they just sell more, it's all going to work. And that's not the answer. Like this whole revenue thing that we get sold, and I think, and nothing against Russell Brunson and all the stuff that his team do, they're amazing. But celebrating revenue targets is probably done so much harm to people. Like I'm working with a guy at the moment that was one of those people that walked across the stage to receive his 2 Comma Club award, and he's got nothing, less than nothing. And he never did, but he sold $1 million. And I think so these revenue targets have really hurt what really matters. It's really hidden what really matters. But sorry, coming back to that sort of initial, we do get when we get our personal stuff mixed up with our business stuff, we have no clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a mess, and we can't tell what we need to charge. We can't tell how much we need to be bringing in order to be profitable. We don't know if the business is actually working. We don't know how much we need to hold in our business account to feel safe, or to how much we can take out because we don't feel safe. All of
Mm-hmm.
those things start to become a mess because our business and our personal are mixed up together.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to tie a few things together just because I heard them and it's really kind of powerful. And I don't want to let it get skipped over because one of the things that you said in the earlier mistakes is that when we don't have a relationship with it, when we don't know it, it kind of turns off our gift and it becomes the thing that catalyzes its ability to
Yes,
make more of it.
yes,
And
absolutely.
and that I think for me also, and I live on this podcast kind of publicly exposed, like at the height of my career, quote unquote, I was making $500,000 a month.
Yeah,
Like there were 2, 3, 4, $500,000 months. And I lived in that solution of like, oh, well, I can just go make more. I can
yeah,
just go make more. I can just go make more.
yeah,
But the lifestyle creep came in and
yeah.
then the management creep came in. And then the craziest thing happened. And I would love your thoughts on this. I've never talked about this publicly, but the lifestyle creep made me started resenting my lifestyle
Yeah.
and the ability to make the money because I was spending more time managing the stuff
Yes.
than I was managing the business to be able to have the freedom to do that. And it was like backwards.
100%. Yeah. And that is absolutely right. It's interesting. I see this all the time is when people take on like, and it's really hard to avoid. Like when you start to earn more, that lifestyle creep, it takes a lot of discipline to actually go, no, 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 I'm not going to allow my lifestyle creep to keep up with my income or even my business expenses to keep
Business
up with
creep.
the income.
Yeah.
And I see this all the time. And you know, as our income goes up, so do our expenses. And unfortunately, sometimes we then get ahead of ourselves. And so the expenses go ahead in anticipation that it's just going to continue. And then all of a sudden, and I have a really good friend who's a client as well, who this is exactly what happened to her. She had a media buying agency. And it was that as the business started to make more revenue, she took on more staff and more software and more this and more that. And so what happened was that it just seemed as the revenue went up, so did the expenses. So she was never able to take any more of a salary. It looked like her business was successful, but in reality, what happened was all of a sudden she had one bad month where it was around that time that Facebook changed all their
Yeah.
algorithms and those sorts of things. And literally overnight, her business went from earning, 100 grand a month. Suddenly the revenue dropped over the course of a couple of months. And and basically there wasn't enough revenue to keep up with what her expenses now were. And even though she had a month's worth of reserves in place, that disappeared in an instant. And before she knew it, in a month and a half, she was suddenly in debt and she had all these staff she's trying to pay and she couldn't meet payroll and it all came collapsing down.
Yeah.
Because the expenses had kept up with the revenue and she hadn't actually said, no, no, I'm going to do this incrementally. I'm going to take surplus, build reserves.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say to people, you want to build your base wide so that you can build your business high. And so this is, I always say what we want to do is understand what your expenses are. Your goal is in your operating account is to have 1.5 times your monthly expenses in your operating account, but then also to have, say, 3 to 6 months worth of your operating expenses in reserves. And what that means is as your expenses go up, so if you add a new staff member, that means the amount you need sitting in your operating account goes up, but it also means the amount you need have sitting in your reserves account goes up. And that way, you've got this money behind you. And as the business gets bigger, so should your reserves, which means that you don't have to stress about the unexpected.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
Facebook changing their algorithm or whatever it might be.
For sure. I wanna interject, and because I love that we're getting a solution. We're gonna talk
Yeah,
about
sorry, I
this.
didn't mean to go there.
No, I'm
Yeah,
actually really, really glad that you did. I'm really, really glad that you did because the other thing that I see as well, and I'm gonna real life this for a minute when we talk about business expenses. Like when I work with clients one on one, they all come to me because they want to scale and they feel like out of alignment, right?
Yeah.
And typically it's because
Yeah.
there's some resistance, or I don't feel like I'm in my gift, or money isn't flowing. And we'll look and we'll find money before we ever make money. Like we'll find 20 grand a month, 40 grand a month, 60
Yeah.
grand a month. But for everybody listening as an entrepreneur, it happens at every level. When we're
Yeah.
talking about either lifestyle creep, that one's pretty self-explanatory, but business creep, this
Yeah.
is softwares. These are things that you've signed up for. These are things that you forgot about, or all
Yeah.
the apps that we use on our phone
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
create content. And the biggest one that I see, Phil, is process.
Yes.
Process. And I don't talk about process a lot. It's a dirty little secret that I do process with my clients because I have a background in it. I just don't advertise it because I really don't like it.
Mm.
But I've gone in and seen people with 8-week podcast processes that were costing $8,000 to get to production. And in a 1-hour meeting, we reduced it down to a week and
Yeah.
$1,600.
Yeah.
But when you extrapolate out 8 times 12,
Yeah.
we're talking about a $90,000 expense a year versus a $9,000 expense a year,
Yes.
because that's how it's always been done.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's where I see the creep come in the most. And that's where the creep came in for me the most as well,
Yes.
where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, we'll hire this, so we'll do this, and not
Yes.
knowing those numbers is what basically created that. And it becomes this like doom scroll machine that you end up living in, which brings me to my next question, because I think the last mistake that I see that I've lived through, and you can expand on, is the feast or famine cycle, where
Yeah.
we get this external pressure
Yeah.
and we get addicted to the chaos. And so it's
Yeah.
always either everything's great or everything's horrible.
Yeah.
And then the moment everything horrible comes up, then you sprint, you
Yeah.
come back. And then because we never get to the root,
Yeah.
we end up recreating the famine cycle so that we have that external pressure again
Yes.
to be able to perform. And then we resist the performance because we're like, I thought I just wanted to live in my gift. Like I love helping people, but now I keep living in this cycle.
Yes. That's exactly right. And it is so hard. And this is what you were alluding to before. It is so hard to really live in your gift and do your best work and feel fulfilled and change lives when you're stressed about your financial situation. Like the two just can't exist together very well. Um, and so this is, again, when you do get your finances in some sort of process that is a consistent, this is just how I do it on a month to month basis. I commit this time, and it's a discipline and it's a sacrifice, because I understand that for visionaries, it is hard to look at the nitty gritty. Like it just bores us to tears. And especially when there is a fear, there is a shame, there is an embarrassment attached to it. We want to avoid it like the plague. But the reality is, when you've got a very simple process in place that it's consistent every month, I do this. I put this couple of hours aside every month. I do this, 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 and this, and then I know that everything's okay, and I can live within my gift and do my best work. And so you can avoid that feast or famine cycle as exactly as you described it. And we see this all the time where it's self-inflicted,
Mm-hmm.
and and the number of times I had people say, I've been through this cycle, I've been bust basically, 6 or 7 times, and I'm so scared. And in fact, a mutual friend of ours said these words to me. She says, I'm so scared that I'm going to make the mistake again. I'm so scared that I'm going to be back here in a year's time or 2 years' time. And it's very common. And so unless we actually break that circuit and say, okay, this time I am going to do something. I'm going to face the fears. I'm going to face where I'm at financially and just do what I need to do. When we do that, all of a sudden your life changes. And it comes back to what I was saying to you before, building the reserves and taking excess money. And you're talking about the waste, it's huge. Like, this is again one of the biggest lies of grow and scale. So how often do you hear people say, okay, well, once you've got something that's a viable product, you then just grow and scale, and it's going to be easy. But growing and scaling burns cash. It also takes us into a place where we're not necessarily gifted. When we start taking on staff and team and having to manage people, and all of a sudden this is no longer fun. And so when we actually can take our time and do it properly and actually purposely build the business through cash flow, then everything slows down. And it is a sacrifice to go slower, but you can break out of that feast or famine cycle very, very easily. It does grate a little bit initially. I get that, because it's not our natural to slow down and just to do things methodically. But once you do it, it actually frees you up to do your best work.
A
And
thousand percent.
yeah, and to live in your talent or your gift or your skill, because you now know that the finances aren't an issue.
Well, and I know for me personally, the thought of opening the dark closet in the basement
Yeah.
was way more scary than actually seeing what was on the other side.
Yes. Yes. Can I just say, can I please share this with you? I the number of times that I have people that are resistant to doing that initial, okay, let's actually find out what your expenses have been. As you know, normally what I do when I work with clients is we go back and have a look at the last 6 months. And so we'll basically pull all that data. Where did our money go? You know, how much did we earn? Where did our money go? And bit by bit, we're going to look at it all. And people have such a great fear for that. And when I work with people, I always say to them, I will never ever judge you. I would never, I will never question it. The way you spend the money is your priority. What I want to help you do is move forward. I want to help you succeed. I want to help you thrive. So we're not going to dwell on the past, but we are going to use it to help us understand why we're at where we're at right now and how we move forward. And as you know, George, our brains, in the absence of facts, will almost always err to fear. It'll always fill that void with fear. And it's very easy for us then to catastrophize that situation. Um, and so, but the reality is, as soon as we actually have the courage to face the facts and get all the data, it's never as bad as what we thought it was. It's never. And the words that I hear from people when we've taken them through this process are things like freeing, powerful, empowering, cathartic, therapeutic. These are all the words that I hear after we've been through this process, because now we've faced the facts, we've got them there. They're not nearly as bad as what we thought they were, and now we can do something about it. And that is such a gift. So I totally understand not wanting to face it, but there is so much power in actually having the courage to do that.
Yeah, and I want to transition to grandma's jars, and I want to just, throw this out there, because for me, for some reason, when I reframe things into other examples, they land a lot deeper. And I now
Yeah.
think about money as like my relationship with cooking a recipe, and I need to know how much of what ingredient I have.
Yeah.
And then I was also just thinking in that moment too, for any parent listening to this, or anybody that resonates or has ever watched a kid or seen a kid, or even had a dog or something along those lines that you're a steward of, I, as a father, want to know where my son is at every moment. I want to know how he's feeling, what he's thinking. Does he have enough lunch in his bag? And there's plenty of times as a parent where like the school sends me a message and my heart drops because I'm like, oh, we had a behavioral day.
Yeah.
But I never ignore the message.
Yeah.
I'm never like, oh, I'm not looking. And then the
Yeah, that's
moment
right.
I step into it, I'm like, okay, this is where we are.
Yeah.
Now, what's the plan? How do we
Yeah.
make a solution? And I know for me, I've had to like trick my own brain into being like, okay, this is my son, or this is my recipe, or this is the thing. What I'm looking for is the information that actually allows me to feel empowered and
Yes.
inspired to make a confident decision.
Yes.
And the thing that I would say to you, and when you said this earlier, is like, when people look at discipline, when they look at what some would label as sacrifice, I actually see it in the exact opposite way, because now you have a crystal clear path to actually have everything that you want and
Yes.
actually achieve
Yes.
everything that you want, but it's
Yes.
real.
Yeah.
And I know, and I'm just going to share this in case anybody's listening. It wasn't that I was afraid to open the door, and it wasn't that I didn't know, because I think all of us know, no matter what level of
Yeah.
business we're at, we
Yeah.
all know.
Yeah.
I think it was the humility that
Sure.
came with looking in the mirror.
Yeah.
And for me, it had to, it didn't have to, it required a deeper values conversation with myself
Yeah.
that I had put off on having.
Yeah.
I had allowed my life to be dictated by external validation, or I had allowed my life to be dictated by status
Mm-hmm.
or relationships or revenue,
Yeah.
instead of genuinely, because on the other side of that door wasn't, oh, I don't know what's behind this door. Of course I know. That's why I'm hustling so
Yeah.
hard to get clients. Like, I know, I might not know how bad it is,
Yeah.
but I know was because at a deeper level, I got to sit with like, what do you truly value?
Yeah.
Like, what brings you joy? And one of the things that I haven't talked about in years on this podcast, but it used to be a very early topic, was a lot of us as entrepreneurs say that we value three big things. We value time,
Yeah.
we value money,
Yeah.
and we value freedom.
Yes.
And yet, behind that door are all three of them, but it actually forces me to utilize them and face the fact that I value it. And
Yeah.
that was the part that I think was so sticky, was the fact that I was just afraid to look and like, oh, I'm actually going to get to spend more time with my son, or I can take a weekend off, or I
Yeah.
can take that trip, because I was getting so much distraction in the doingness of the feast
Yeah.
and famine cycle and not looking. I never had to turn off and just be. I
Yeah.
never had to really face and look at that. And so I just also want to presence this, because Phil helps so many people with this. And I try to just live radically honest on this podcast, is like, there is no shame in any of this. There's no fault in any of this. And I think the way that you articulated it so well is, none of us were necessarily taught this. Like, we had
No.
an idea or a product and it worked.
Yeah.
Just like none of us were taught, unless you intentionally went on like how to lead a team or how to do payroll,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
truthfully, for everybody listening to this, even if you went to school for marketing, guess what?
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
No.
And it's this shifting it from this dread and overwhelm into this like curiosity and humility of like, okay, I can do this. I can have this. I can be a steward of this. It's just going to require me to like really look at in the mirror those things that allow me to feel stronger or allow me to have more confidence.
Yeah.
Just like I'd be dumb if I was like, I'm going to go run an ultra marathon. I'm going to go
Yeah.
blindly run through the snow in Montana and think I make it. Like, I'm going to go look for resources or look for tools, or like, what shoes should I wear? Do
Yeah.
the socks matter?
Yeah.
And I think just for everybody reframing this, like, there's no fault in this. There's no shame in this. There's no blame in this. And we could conspiracy theory this all day, but that's a whole other podcast of like
Oh
why
yeah.
we
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
this
No.
way
No. No.
and why we
No.
feel this way
No.
in media.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to throw that in, because there's so much depth and profound wisdom underneath each one of those mistakes. And I imagine for everybody listening, these are things that we all face. And I think the last point I'll make is, there's not a finish line to facing them. There's a change in the relationship with them.
Yeah.
You're always going to want to be a steward of this and learn how to do it better, because when you get to different revenue levels, you manage it differently. You do different things with it. You give back with it more. You manage your team differently. You manage your taxes differently. It's
Yeah.
not ever going to be a finish line. It's more so something that you build a deep relationship and discipline with, but it feels empowering, not
Yeah.
sacrificial, because
Yeah.
on the other side, you actually have the clarity that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah. So I wanted to ask too, because it's kind of perfect. We spent the first half of the show in like mistakes, mistakes, mistakes,
Yeah.
mistakes. Can you tell everybody what grandma's jar is?
Okay. All right. So when I was 18 years old, my grandma, I was spending a year in the UK as an adventure training instructor. It was my, gap year between school and whatever was going to happen next in life. And I was in the UK, earning £15 a week as an adventure training instructor. And I remember going and visiting my grandma, who lived over in the West Coast at Western-super-Mare in the UK. And she taught me how to budget using, and you can see behind me there, physical glass jars and physical money. And she literally would walk around to the post office once a month, pick up her pension in cash, walk home. This is the days before internet banking. And she had these glass jars in a kitchen cupboard, and each jar had a label on it. This is the electricity jar. This is the housekeeping jar, which for her was things like haircuts, clothes, etc. This is the groceries jar, and so on. And so she had these jars, and she'd worked out at the beginning of each year how much of her pension she needed to put into each of those jars, so that when those expenses turned up, the money was just sitting there ready to go. Super simple. And she always made sure that after she put money in all the jars, there was still some money left over, which she could then take to the bank. And because of that, grandma, despite the fact my granddad died at a youngish age, she paid off the mortgage, and in the end, she died a fairly wealthy woman, because she just put it into, mutual funds and those sorts of things, anything that was left over. But the rules of the jars were really simple. you put money in the jar. What money you don't spend accumulates, so that whenever that expense turns up, we have the money there to go, and always have less in the jars than what you earn, so you've got some extra money to put into savings or investments or what have you. So simple. And anyway, I came back from the UK at the ripe old age of 18 and started teaching people about how to just budget, manage your money, get out of debt, those sort of things. And it just, through experience, it evolved from there. And I didn't immediately become a financial advisor. I actually became an occupational therapist for many, many years, which is how I met my wife. But it then, God works in ways, and just I'd been helping people on the side on the weekends get out of debt, save money, etc. And then I had the opportunity to become a financial advisor. I thought, yes, this is what I want to do. But it's interesting, it took me 15 years to realize that most financial advisors don't teach the basics of finance. They're interested in managing people's money and helping them retire, but they don't teach how do you budget, how do you get out of debt, how do you even get started investing. They don't teach that stuff. And so anyway, I went on to become a partner in Australia's leading stockbroker financial planning firm, earning way more money than I'd ever imagined. But I wasn't allowed to teach any of that because it wasn't in my pay grade. And so I came to this point one day where I was in the UK. We were taking the kids on a white Christmas tour. We said this was our reward for paying off our mortgage and all those sorts of things. And so we took the kids on a white Christmas tour, sitting in this beautiful cottage in the UK in the Forest of Dean. And I remember one night being wide awake thinking, I can't go back to what I was doing, because I was every night, every weekend, I was teaching people how to budget, get out of debt, manage your money. And then I was doing my high stress job as a stockbroker, financial advisor. And I knew I couldn't do both. I couldn't keep doing both. And so God basically said to me, I want you to leave your stockbroker financial planning firm, and I want you to step into this full time. Which is a very scary thing, because I was earning like $1 million a year doing what I was doing. I was very good at it, very well respected, had clients that I loved, but it wasn't fulfilling. Yet this thing over here where I was earning next to nothing from, Grandma's Jars, it was the best thing ever. And I just saw lives change in a huge way, and I knew that's what God wanted me to do. Anyway, it took me 18 months to actually decide to do that, because I didn't want to give up the $1 million income. But the thing is, once I stepped into that entrepreneurial world, I actually started to realize, building a business around all of this. I started to come across entrepreneurs that had no idea how to manage their finances. They were lost. They were good at what they did, but they had no idea how to manage their finances. So what happened was I started to evolve the principles of Grandma's Jars. And because I'd worked with business, like as a stockbroker financial advisor, I'd worked with big businesses, I'd worked with all sorts of things. I knew what it took to make a business work. And so I then just started applying that to entrepreneurs and evolving Grandma's Jars principles into frameworks and strategies that can help anyone, any business owner, manage their finances. So I know that was a bit of a long, drawn out sort of
No, it's perfect. It's perfect. I love it.
But so now, like, I don't actually get my entrepreneurs doing exactly Grandma's Jars, but we have different pools and ways of actually thinking about your finances, which is the equivalent of that. So yeah, very, very powerful, very simple. And it doesn't matter what kind of business you are. As I said, I'm not come from an accounting background. I think accountants just confuse things. And sorry, I don't mean that against just accountants, but they have frameworks to work in, and they don't think like entrepreneurs. And so what I do is I come from a direction, being an entrepreneur myself and having had a number of businesses over the years, I actually know how to, there's so many times I see people who their accountant has patted them on the back and said, well done, you've made a profit this year. And you're sitting there going, well, where is it? It's not in my bank account. Where's this profit, this mythical profit? And so many business owners are in this sort of situation. It's because their accountant looks at profit, not cash flow profit. And so what we want, you and I as business owners, when we think about profit, we think about, I want to have more money in my bank account. And so that's what I help entrepreneurs find, is that money. How do I get the cash flow profit? How do I get that money so I do have more money in my bank account at the end of each month?
No, I love it. And I think it's really a beautiful synopsis as well, like to you as a man, and for people listening to this, like following your heart and being in your passion, and like you embody so well everything that you stand for, which is why I love you to absolute pieces. And just because now feels like the best time, can you tell everybody about the book? Because I have a feeling your book is a manual for all of this. And so now would be the time.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, mate. Yeah. Look, it's called the cash flow fix. And if you read it, it is just the basics. Like, there's no accounting talk in there. There's no financial metrics in there. There's none of that. I actually share my cascade, which is my thought process that I go through with all of my clients. Whenever I meet with a client, whether it's a personal finance client or a business finance client, I always visualize their finances like water in a cascade. So,
Mm-hmm.
our income comes in, like rain comes in, it forms a stream, it goes into a pool, which is our first bank account. And that first bank account is, do I have enough money there to cover all my expenses? If not, if I've got less money coming in than expenses going out, that pool never fills up. And if that pool never fills up, then I can't do any of the other things, further downstream, like paying off debt, building up reserves, life goals, getting started investing. None of that stuff ever happens. And so, whenever I think about people's finances, I try to visualize where am I at right now? And this is the thing that holds most people up is I know I need to do something about my finances, but I have no idea where to start, what to do, or how to do it. And so the
Mm-hmm.
whole idea of the book is that by teaching the sort of the cascade principles, we start with the absolute first step. And it might be that you're through that first step. So you can self-identify and go, okay, I've got that bit nailed, but I'm up to this step. So what do I need to do then to move to the next step? Because like you said before, there's really three things we entrepreneurs want. The first thing is we do want the time to be able to spend with our loved ones. We want to be in control of our time.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is we want to be able to do something we absolutely love with our lives and not work for the man doing something we hate every day. And the third thing is we want to earn more money doing it than we could working for someone else. And the
Mm-hmm.
problem is what ends up happening is because we work so hard in a business that gives nothing back, we actually start to resent the business and what we're doing, which is such a tragedy because we've been given a gift. We have to work longer hours than we ever imagined just to try and make it all work. So much. I had my daughter once said to me as a joke after I become an entrepreneur, but it really cut. She said, "Oh, become an entrepreneur, give up the 9 to 5 and start working 5 to 9." And that was such a insightful. She's only 18 at the time. It was such an insightful thing to say, but it was so true. And she didn't know the half of it. Because one of the things I didn't share was I didn't apply all these principles for myself when I first started work as an entrepreneur, and I made every mistake in the book, and I wasn't doing what I was teaching my clients. And as soon as I took, ate humble pie, like you were talking about before, and said, well, I actually need to be applying this to myself, then everything changed. But it's such a miserable place to be when you step into entrepreneurship. You've given up so much and even the security for your family to do this. And when you start to fail, there is so much shame and embarrassment and heartache. But when you start to get it right and when you can get the steps right, when you know what you need to do, everything can change very, very quickly. So the book will give you clarity. It'll help you work out, well, what step am I at? What do I need to do to get to the next step? And if you just follow that process, I promise you it will change everything. And it's written very simply. There's no hard maths. There's no hard, as I said, language in there. It's just my heart and what I do every day with hundreds and hundreds of clients over the
Mm-hmm.
last 30 years. So,
And where can everybody get it? Where is the book?
look, Amazon. It's
Yep.
actually not there yet, but I think by the time this
It will be by the time
it
everybody's
will be
listening to
there.
this.
Okay, March 3rd or something like that. It's going to be released. Amazon, but also we do have a pay sales page where you can get it. I honestly do not know. I think it's called the cashflowbook.com. You can go to get it. But I'll give those to you, George.
Yeah, we'll have all of them linked in the show notes. And
Yeah,
the only reason I wanted to ask now, because we have, 10 more minutes on the show, but for everybody listening, I've experienced this firsthand. Like Phil is a mentor of mine, a dear friend of mine, a brother in Christ with me, and somebody who has selflessly poured into me, truthfully, more than I thought I deserved. And I've learned to accept, and thank you for that. But the cascade effect alone and the thought process around it simplifies it all. And I have a feeling, and knowing you, that this book is almost like a manual on how to run. It's not theory. It's not everything. It's like, here, wherever you are, start here
Yeah.
and then stay here until you earn this next step. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of books that I have in my arsenal that I always go back to. And you guys know them on this podcast because I talk about them wholeheartedly. And this one for me, as somebody who's a friend as well as a patient of Phil's, is going to add this to the arsenal of truly the simplicity in it, as I think success comes from simplicity, not complexity. And even when we go back to the beginning of this show, one of the mistakes that happens is it is overcomplicated, and we get into these
Yeah.
meetings with accountants and we get in with tax strategists and cash flow and all of it. And it almost adds to the fear and the dread because
Yeah.
it feels so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be simple. And I
Yeah.
love the cascade analogy because I know it and we're still working towards it for where I want to be.
Yeah.
But just really having the ability to bucket in your mind and be able to understand what's coming in and coming out. Like this book, I will put my stamp of approval on all day. And so we'll have all the things linked in the show notes. You can see it on Amazon. We'll have his website. I'm also going to give you his Instagram because one thing I love about Phil is that Phil loves people. And so I also know that if you message Phil or ask Phil a question or if he can support you in any way, he will be the first one to jump on a call. And he has been on odd calls on Australia time for me,
Yeah.
but he's here to serve and support. And so just because I'm asking, I'm going to link this in the show notes too, but what's your Instagram? Because that's where everybody here lives. Do you know it?
Yeah, and that is George. I'll be honest with you, that is not my strength, Instagram. But I will get it to you. It's something that I'm working on right now. But I'm ashamed to say, being that
It's okay.
older generation, it is not something that I've been great with the.
It's okay. This is great though, because this is where I get to pour back into you.
That's yes,
Where I'm like,
yeah,
okay, like, can we do this book launch? Right? Can I help with your Instagram? Like,
yeah,
can we
yeah. Thank you,
really,
mate.
really do
Yeah, yeah.
this?
That would
And
be helpful.
and for everybody listening, I was even strategizing with Phil before the call of like creating a resource
You were
that
100%. You
you
were.
will be able to basically get from him, no email, just to basically
Yeah,
support you in this. And
yeah,
even hearing this, like just understanding the power and first bringing your awareness to this and just changing the way that you think about it. And I think that's going to lead into my last question is you alluded to this, and I'm going to lead this a little bit, but I think the best place for people to start with this is truly to have an awareness, to
yeah,
really, really know. And I'm going to say this wholeheartedly. I also realized for me the amount of shame that I carried and guilt that I carried of, like, to your previous point, like, how did I walk across those stages, or how was I a New York Times bestseller, or how did I have all this? And it created this isolation to where the empowerment of this came from doing it with somebody, whether
yeah,
that's the book, a mentor, a friend, somebody on your team,
yeah,
somebody that you trust that like is your teammate. I think is the one note that I'll throw into this of, like, even when you're doing your current state or having these conversations,
yeah.
don't allow the pit of self-isolation to take over and
No,
increase guilt and shame and fault and blame.
no.
But I would love to hear from you too, because I think no matter what business level you're at, you could be working towards your first 5 figures, you could be consistently making 6 figures, or you could be making 7 figures and more and up into
Yeah,
8 listening to this. But this awareness is almost like being the triage nurse of the heartbeat or the blood of your entire business.
it is.
And the less that you know, the more likely disease and infection will creep in.
Yeah.
But the more you're aware, you can spot these things. And so I would love kind of your thoughts for everybody listening of, like, how do they navigate this? Where is the best place to start, and what do they do?
That is a great question, George. You're 100% right. Awareness, and again, that's what like. We fear what we're going to find, and it's not as bad as you think. And you are not alone, and there needs to be no shame. No one has taught you how to manage your finances. And the thing is, it seems, I can say it from my perspective. I was lucky. I had a grandmother that taught me how to budget when I was 18 years old. Okay, but not many people have a grandmother that taught them how to budget when they're 18 years old. And I've evolved it through, literally tens of thousands of people that I've helped over that 30 years. So I've learned more along the way. But your awareness of where you stand financially really is so crucial. I had a client a few years ago who came to see me. Lovely lady. She said she hadn't owned, and she came literally with a box full of envelopes, bills, that she had been too afraid to open for like 6 months. And I think sometimes we get like that. It's like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. But it was interesting as soon as we actually got to it and we'd listed out all the bills and we knew exactly what all her expenses were. It was like a weight had been lifted off her. And we don't realize how much it crushes us when we don't know. We think we're sort of saving ourselves the pain of knowing the reality. But in fact, that crushing, like you said before, we sort of know that it's not right. But until we actually know what it is, we can't do something about it. So sitting down, like, and this is actually quite easy to do. It takes a bit of time, but it's actually super, super easy. And is actually sitting down and, with Excel these days, again, I know there's a lot of people that hate Excel, but if you had Excel or something, it's just going through and downloading your transactions and just being able to go, okay, where did the money go? And working through that. And I normally, and this is what we did, George, when we were working together, we actually went through and had a look at the different bank accounts, credit cards, those things, and actually created a list of, each month, here is what the revenue was, and here is what all the expenses were. Now, this is where obviously, like we discussed, having your personal and your business all mixed up together, it's like, it can be difficult. But gradually, we teased out all the personal stuff. We made a rule that business is business, personal is personal. And if we need to spend something from personal life, we transfer the money from the business so we can spend it in our business account, our personal account, and vice versa. So a lot of people just starting out, they might be starting a business and they're spending all their business expenses from their personal account. So no. Transfer the money first to your business account because it's easier to track those transactions of money in and then spend from your business account. But if we can just start to tease those out and get a clear idea of here's what revenue I created, here's what all my business expenses were for the month of February, and then I can see down the bottom, okay, do I have more or less? Have I created a little profit down the bottom there? It's not real profit yet, but have I created a little profit down the bottom there? Okay, if I have, do I need to put some money aside for tax? And then what's left over after that? And if we can start there, like when you start there, because as soon as you start there, you can start to go, okay, this wasn't a great month, but what can I do to do better next month? What can I do? Are there expenses in there? I go, oh my gosh, there's that software that I signed up for in a free trial, and I forgot to cancel it, and I've been charged it for the last 3 years, and I'm not even using it. We can go through and actually start to delete all the stuff that's unnecessary, and you'd be amazed that once you start to focus just on those numbers, here's my revenue, here's what my expenses were for the month. Have I got anything left? All of a sudden, it opens up to, what do I need to do to change it? That's all you need to do. And I help people do this. And there's ways, like, because I do it so often, it's ways of simplifying it where you can get real clarity a lot faster. But go back and look at the last 6 months. And if you can do that, then you start to get a bit of an idea of what are the essential expenses? How much do I need to be making? Am I even charging enough to make sure that I've got all my expenses covered? I have so many clients that have gone from like minus, $10,000 months to positive $20,000 month, simply because it starts with, let's get the clarity. Once we've got the clarity, can we eliminate some of these expenses, all the waste that's in the business, so we can get lean, get really lean within the business, and then let's start pricing ourselves properly so that we're charging enough so that we can cover our expenses, we can cover our salary, we can cover our tax, we can cover a profit that we want to make. And then all of a sudden it starts working. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I actually think it's the best place to land the plane, because the other part that's underneath it is not sprinting at this, it's compartmentalizing it into the pieces. And the way that you broke that down is so eloquent and so powerful. And for me, as we land this plane, number one is connect with Phil, and we'll have all of the stuff in the show notes. And just your personal website is your name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's philmcgilvray.com, which is PHILMCGILVRAY.com. And then for the rest of it, we'll have it in the show notes. We'll have the book, we'll have his Instagram. And I genuinely mean this. Phil is a man of service. And so give him the opportunity to pour into you or connect with you or share any takeaways here. And I think for me, the most important part is it doesn't matter where you are in your business or even how well you think you know. Give yourself this last conversation with Phil, this step of like awareness, of looking at that 6 months and bringing it into your awareness to just start analyzing and have an observation and start to get comfortable with what's in that closet door, because then you'll realize it's easier to just leave it open
Yeah.
the entire time. And
Yeah.
so, brother, I love you. I appreciate you so much. We'll have to do this again for like a part 2 and get into like deeper details and all that
Absolutely.
magical stuff.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, George. Look, we've known each other for quite a long time now, and it's been such a joy working with you, and you pour into me. Every time we meet, you pour into me as well. So I'm always appreciative of these conversations that we get to have, before and after the actual podcast itself.
Yeah.
So yeah, mate, as I said, if there's anything I can ever do, please don't hesitate to reach out. But guys, thank you, George. Look, you and I, we're both the same. We love pouring into people. We love helping people, and there's so many people out there these days that put the hard sell on you to buy stuff off from it. That's not our hearts. We want clients. We want to help people, but just being able to change people's perspective in life so they can thrive is just such a joy. So thank you.
1,000%, my friend. Yeah. So thank you for being here. For everybody listening, this has been another episode and hopefully an eye-opening one of The Mind of George. So I always say that relationships beat algorithms. Well, I will also add that the most important one is you. And now I'm going to add one, and your relationship with your money and your cash flow and the awarenesses that you have. And so don't let today be shelf help. Let today be an invitation to open that door and to step into this so that you can feel empowered and make the decisions that you want to make and achieve the things that you've set out to achieve. So if I can help you in any way, you know how to get a hold of me. And also we'll have all of Phil's information listed in the show notes. So I'll either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we're out.